Well, here we are, Renee. And do we have a guest today?
We do. We've got a special guest in our studios today. We're very excited for him to be here. Raymond Lavine is going to be here chatting with us today about trauma-informed building, which is really exciting, but also personal care planning for taking care of our long-term care needs, which is a fun conversation because it's important both ways. And I've lived, as you know, both sides of this recently. So I'm really excited to dive into this conversation. But before we dive into the conversation and introduce our guest, Jason, what's going on the farm?
Well, the last couple of months, it's been so hot outside, Renee. And so I thought I'd remind all of our listeners about evapotranspiration because it's partly my fault. And you know what evapotranspiration is? Here in the
Is
Corn
it
Belt, it
is
gets
it
humid
corn sweat?
outside.
Corn
It's
sweat?
all, you're right, corn sweat.
Yes.
Um, and do you remember how many thousands of gallons of moisture are released into the air from 1 acre of corn?
I don't. It's a lot.
3 to 4,000 gallons. And so I complain all summer long that I'm just dripping wet every time I go out for a run or just walking down my dog down the street. And it's my fault. So all my corn out there in the field is just sweating. And so a lot of people across the country don't get that experience of just humid beyond belief and makes everything hotter. So that's my farmer. I guess that's my farmer data piece of the day, just to
I like
remind
it.
us all that's how it works.
I like it. Well, today, everyone, we're going to introduce you to Raymond Lavine. He's an extended care benefits advisor. He advises and designs long-term care benefits for families and LTC benefits for companies. So, Mr. Lavine, will you do a better introduction than that and tell us all about you and how we're excited to have you today? Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. You find me in Washington State where I live, and my career has been in, mostly financial services. I've veered off to other things, but mostly it's been in financial services, commercial banking, mortgage banking, insurance. And for the last 14, 15 years, I've been involved in long-term, extended care plans, also known as long-term care insurance, also known as nursing insurance, also known as, I don't want to pay the premiums. There are all kinds of ways of how people think about caregiving, or I don't want to think about it. I'll wait till later. So, that's sort of a summary of my background. We were talking before the program that I spent a year at Coe College in Iowa. It was a very interesting experience. And I have a lifelong friend that also lives in Eastern Washington. And living in Iowa was an interesting experience.
That it would be coming from a coast. I can only imagine.
That's true. That's true.
It's very
Actually,
different.
well, Coe is it's a very good college, and actually, it's famous. William Shire, who wrote *Rise and Fall of the Third Reich*, was a Coe graduate.
Mm, cool.
We have all kinds of hidden gems here in Iowa. That's one of the great things about being here is you can always find a connection back. Renee and I get this all over the country when we travel, that it's amazing how many
Hmm.
people have a connection back.
Yeah.
So you've
And
done a lot. Go
not
ahead,
being a very
Renee.
big state. I mean, it's
Oh.
really surprising how many people we run into that has a family member or they lived here for a season or something. It is pretty funny. But so, Mr. Levine, you talked to us about all that you do for planning for people, but you also talk about this piece about trauma-informed design and thinking about like how to design for people for that caregiving space. So what is trauma-informed design and what is that about?
Well, let me just, whether on podcasts or people will ask me to say, well, don't spend too much time talking about long-term care plans. Talk about caregiving, but they're really, they're really one and the same. It's like
Hmm.
saying, let's talk about health, but not talk about health insurance. Or
Hmm.
let's talk about retirement, but let's not talk about, retirement savings and planning. Or auto insurance. You own a car, you're going to own auto insurance, you have to. But let me just talk about the way that I present ideas to people is, what is caregiving? What is caregiving? And caregiving is anytime somebody is taking care of another person, whether it's your children or your pets or or your plants, where you're caring for something. And in my field, of course, it's caring for the people who need what they call activities of daily living, which means eating, bathing, dressing. But it's more than that, but it's something that's happened to your health where you need caregiving. Now we get into, if you need caregiving, what's your plan? Do you have enough resources that you can do it yourself? Do you want to do a reverse mortgage? Do you want to be in VA benefits? Do you want to do Medicaid? Do you just not care? Or do you want to own a long-term care benefit? The reason is it's always about money. It is always about money because, and also it's about people's lives, because your spouse, your partner, your friends, everybody's involved, and there's a toll on it. And there are a lot of aspects to it. And if you want me to tell a personal story about that, I'll be happy to do that, because I just
Please.
recent. Well, I've had a severe heart issue. So for the last 3 weeks, I've been in and out of the hospital. And so, there are things that come up that I've learned, because you forget or you don't know about your health, and also what happens in a hospital. And when you're in the hospital, they're taking care of a lot of things for you, your blood pressure, your pills, and then every once in a while the nurse or doctor will come in and ask you, questions. And I don't have a lot of patience for questions, not because it isn't important, but sometimes how they do it. But what I am astonished about is there are many instances now where people cannot leave the hospital, not because they're recovering, is they have no place to go,
Well,
or even if they go home, they're going to ask you in the hospital, and they're going to go through all the things, which I didn't know. I mean, they will ask you, if you go home, do you feel safe?
mhm.
Are there people at home? Do you need caregiving? And there are social services, and there are things that Medicare can pay for a short period
Yeah.
of time. But they will ask you a lot of questions. And then when you leave, you're going to have medications, you're going to have a lot of paperwork. They're going to call you, you got to call. So you're going to make a lot of appointments. So it isn't just caregiving isn't just, hi, let me lift you out of bed. Let me help you with the bathroom.
Mhm.
In some ways, that's the easy part. That's like with children. It isn't changing the diapers that's a big deal. If they're annoyed by something, then you got to figure out, why are they annoyed? Or if they're not feeling well, you got to
Yeah.
figure out, why aren't they well, and what do you do? What do you do about it? So I've had a good personal experience in this caregiving. Not only that it enhances what I do, but it's it is a personal and emotional experience.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a
so
hard conversation to have. I hear, I've gone through that with my own parents. And, part of it I hear you talking about, it's planning your environment ahead of time. It's not something a lot of people talk about, and I'm a farmer at heart, that, Raymond. And, as we think about farmers as they age, they stay on the farm. And they don't like to think about that environmental change that may have to happen to support them as they age, or to decrease the isolation. We spend a lot of time talking about isolation and the impact that has on recovery, and all of the other supports that one may need as they age. And so I think it gives us a lot to think about when you talk about that.
Well, I know something about, farming, and I know something about, here's my perspective. Doesn't mean I'm right, it's just my perspective, is that wherever you live, in America or anywhere in the world, you have your culture. And if you're used to being on the farm, why not?
Yeah.
If you have the infrastructure, and what I mean by that is home modifications, if you have people that can care for you, then
Right.
you can stay on the farm. So, you can be
Right.
out in the porch and say, make the rows straighter, or water this, or did you feed the livestock, or did you repair the fence? Sometimes you can do that from your porch, or if it's a distance, you can do it from your cell phone.
Right.
Or actually, I hadn't thought about it. Or you can do it from a drone, fly the
Right.
drone, and then you can see what's going
Yep.
on, being a little bit silly there. But you can have as reasonable life, as self-satisfying life. You just need caregiving. And it doesn't mean that your life is ending. It just means that, your life has changed. My life has changed. There are things that, that I have to do. Not a lot of lifestyle changes. I've never been, big on, on alcohol and smoking, but
Mhm.
there's sometimes there are changes. So maybe you can't do everything. So you got to hire people or have people around you, whether it's family, whether it's
Mhm.
friends. But even in all this, if family and friends, unless they're on the farm,
Yeah.
they live on the same farm, usually depending on, age and caregiving, we always use, think of, nursing homes, old people, us old people. But caregiving can be at any age for a
Yep.
lot of reasons, an accident, an illness, or just frailty or cognitive. So don't just wait and think that you got to get old to need caregiving. Some, things happen, you fall off the tractor.
Yep.
The wire fence bites you. There are a lot of things that could happen where you say that you need caregiving because you can't do the things yourself, and you got to pay for it. Now,
Yep.
again, even if it's social services, it might be for a short period of time, but if you need caregiving for an extended period of time, Medicare doesn't pay for it. And if you need Medicaid or veterans, if you're eligible, you see, a lot of people think that they're eligible, that they're entitled to something. And I always say, and I'm a veteran, I may be eligible, but I'm not
Right.
necessarily entitled. It's based on eligibility if I can get it. And actually, I've been reading too that where a lot of people, if they can't stay on the farm, they've got to sell it. And it may be that they want to leave it as a legacy. Well, what do you do if all these expenses, or even if you do a reverse mortgage,
Mhm.
to pay? Then my suggestion is, you know, if you can, get life insurance so that, when you die, it will pay off the debt, and then, you can keep the farm. And so, to many families, that's a big deal. They want the legacy. They've owned it,
Mhm.
for 100 years, and they want, and the sons and daughters and the grandchildren want to keep the
Yep.
farm. You have to have a plan. My friend who lives in
Yep.
Macokota, who's a contractor, deals with a lot of farmers, and he says, "Look, a lot of them are really wealthy. They just don't have a lot of cash, but
Right.
they own the land, which that can be millions of dollars. Now, of course, also you can sell off some of the land in order to get money, but there are consequences to that too."
Yep. Yeah, it's complicated all the way around. And, there's a whole industry here where we talk about succession planning and long-term care is part of that, as we think about all of the things that people have to take into account and think about. And it's a lot about perspective, as we look at ourselves, like, I look at myself now and I guess I'm not getting any younger. I guess I just figured that out, Renee. But I do know, it was funny because last year, it's not funny, but my mom took a tumble down a set of steps at her at the condo co-op where she lives. And she's 80 years old and she broke a hip and her shoulder at the same time and had to have an emergency hip replacement and she needed rehab. And so she had to go somewhere for 3 months to get back up. And the funny thing when she was at rehab, the facility was a fantastic facility. And she was like, I'm the youngest one here. Everyone there's 95, 100 years old. So it changed her perspective. And so she was more motivated to work out and do the things she had to do to get back on her feet because, it's all about where we find ourselves in our life course. And so that made me chuckle sometimes because you talked about, when we look in the mirror, what do we see and how do we plan for those things?
Right. So as we transition into the data portion, and some of the data we looked up, Raymond talked about like 70% of adults 65 and older are going to need some form of just the long-term care. That does not include all the other caregiving you were talking about, which is much bigger. But if a 65-year-old, they say, should set aside $135,000 per year for amount of money they need to spend, depending where you are in the country. And so we have some data for us, but lifetime expectancy for caregiving can be a lot of money. And it's more for women because their lifespans are longer than men in many cases. And so as in Jason's parents. And so mom's living lots longer. So you have to think about that. So Raymond, when you start before you start thinking about how people do that, how do they decide, like, what kind of timelines are you helping people plan for? Do you base that on maybe the family itself and their history of how lifelong life, or do you go with an expectancy of some sort? And are women really going for longer life expectancies in those plans? Is that how you're seeing it?
Sometimes it's easy, Renee, and sometimes it gets people hide things. And what I mean by that is,
Yeah.
sometimes you have an experience and it would lead you to maybe if I have family and friends that need caregiving, maybe I should do something about my own caregiving plan. What should I do? And those are what I call the conscious. And then you have, the middle where sometimes the financial planner or wealth advisor will suggest it. And the third is what I call the unconscious, where people should have the conversation, but they may see the caregiving, but they don't connect. Hey, if this happens to this person, maybe I need it. The other thing is that I think it's emotional, and
Mhm.
nobody wants to think about, gee, do I need caregiving? Now, if we talk about going to get ice cream, or we talk about vacations, it's whoopee, isn't this wonderful? Let's do that. But some of it is also, who do you talk to about caregiving plans? Now, a lot of times they'll start with a wealth advisor, financial planner. Maybe they're really good at it, and sometimes they're not, because there are two aspects of if you want to get a long-term care plan. One is your age, which is, put it in blunt terms, it's premium. The older you are, the more the premium. Why? you're you're
Yeah.
near. It's like, retirement plan. If you need $2 million in planning and you're age 60, you're going to have to put a lot more away if you can than if you started off at 25.
Right.
The other is your health, because just like a driving record or credit card, it's based on your health assessment. So the younger you are, the better health you are, you might get premiums that are even better than just standard rates. Or most people, might be at standard, but it's better than be standard than to get substandard rates. Think of it as, if you have a driving record, you can still get car insurance. It's going to cost you more.
Hmm.
But the other thing that sometimes we didn't talk about, and I didn't really think about it when I first got started, it's time. The sooner you get a plan or have a plan, if you say I want to put money away, which it'll never happen, but if you do, how much time do you need in order to build up, 400,000, 500,000? If there's longevity in your family, there may be you're more likely to need caregiving than if everybody dies at 50 or 55, if that's,
Mhm.
the DNA in the family. And I've had that too. I don't need it because, we all die young. But I say, yeah, between that, when you die, what's happening. But you also have a lot of people, it's a trust issue. They're saying, if I'm going to take the time, and I've had people that, that first started off, they're very, not necessarily negative and not necessarily argumentative, but they're defensive. And so, I start off with, it seems like this isn't something you want to do. Oh, yeah, we want to do it. Or what do you want your caregiving, whatever it may be, what do you want your caregiving to do? Where do you want your caregiving? Who do you want to be your caregivers? Do you really want your family to be, to give up their lives and careers to help you for whatever period of time? And for the big whammy, and where, where, where do you want to have your caregiving? If you want it at home, do you have home modifications? Do you have, the things in place that you can stay at home, the walk-in bathtub or shower? Do you have the lights? Do you have, handlebars? A lot of things actually that are really, not that expensive. But if you say, this is what I really want to do, then, start now, just do it incrementally rather than, to wait to come home and then you have to do these things that cost $15,000 or 20,000, whatever it may be.
Right.
So that's the way that I approach it. I'll have people who just say, it's just not for me. That's,
Mhm.
that answers the question. But others will say, I just sort of wanted to feel you out, Raymond, to see if, I was comfortable with you and that I trust you or have a level of trust. Now we'll have the conversation, and then they'll start telling stories. If they get that far, everybody has a story about caregiving and the
Mhm.
costs, and they all do. They just want to know, are you the person, Raymond, that I want to tell my story?
Mhm. So Jason, did you want to talk about the specific costs for people in Iowa for their caregiving? Because I think we've got some data on some of the ranges. It's not cheap.
No, it's not, and I think that's part of, why people need to think about this and have the conversation because it really goes back to just not wanting to face some of those things that are hard to face. And this is, we see this a lot in some of the industries that we work with. It's very, very similar to thinking about stigma around mental health. There's kind of a stigma about thinking about our future, where we're going to be. But we know the average cost for Iowans for adult daycare is about just under 20,000 a year. Assisted living averages 62,000 a year, and semi-private nursing home rooms are right at $100,000 a year. So those expenses can certainly add up if you find yourself in one of those levels of care for any duration of time. And I know from working with folks and doing some succession planning around my own farm, the other statistic we look at, and I'd love to get Raymond your thoughts on that, is that balancing act between, however, on average, people only live 6 to 9 months, depending on some factors at some of those more intensive levels of care. I mean, so, generally that's kind of an end of life stay. And there's exceptions to that. Some people are there a long time, 5 or 10 years. But I think it's that's kind of all what is your comfort zone? What do you need to feel comfortable, and how are you going to stay in the place of your choice for as long as possible? And do you have the supports available? The other thing we have to live with in rural Iowa or lots of rural places we work in is sometimes those supports aren't available in your own home. There aren't people to come in. There aren't caregivers. There's workforce shortages. And so you also have to think about your location. Do you need to be closer to a larger micropolitan area or some other space where you can receive the level of care that you want to experience? Because those are certainly challenges in rural areas. You can do all the things and put in the showers and have all of the supports you need, but sometimes there's not the physical help there that you may need over time. And so that's a real challenge, Raymond, in the rural parts of the world where accessibility is a real issue with having the right supports be able to come into the home or maintain someone in their local community for as long as they want to be, right?
That's right. And it's interesting too that people say it's more expensive in the cities, but you're right, if it's more rural. So there are a number of ways that you can, think about it. There are plans that are cash indemnity, meaning it isn't you need a licensed home care agency, that there are plans that you can have where then you can pay family, you can pay friends, you can pay, employees of your company or on the farm to
Mhm.
help you. So you can use there are ways that you can do it if you really want to stay and you really don't want to go to a care facility, 75 miles in, Iowa
Mhm.
City or something. You can do that, and it can be as a cash plan. So you can actually pay people to do it and not have to rely on necessarily home care agency. I would also advise, if somebody has a nursing background or CMA, something in which, they have skills if you need physical therapy, they have, that kind of background, it would be helpful. And look, it's tougher based on, present immigration policies. It does make it more difficult. But again, I'm not on the side of about the caregivers. I'm on the side of I can provide, sufficient funds to help you to get the caregiving and all the other things that go around, not only just the caregiving, but all the administration. And there isn't one easy answer. There isn't one template that says, if you do this, this will all work. You got to listen to, what somebody's saying, what's really important to them. Because I mean, I'll have clients who will say, look, I know we're leaving, at some point we're leaving America, we're going to live, someplace else. There are plans that will pay for international caregiving. So it's listening, asking the questions to say, if you're doing this, how will this plan work? If you want to self-fund, what's your plan to do this? And and having the discussion, they might say, "Oh, I thought it'd be a good idea," but here's the reality: is a lot of people just wait too long. Just wait
Yeah.
too long in order to do something, and it's even worse because there are a lot of things in this. I was at my dentist, and he says his mother had a birthday. I said, oh, how old is she? And somebody came up about because was asked every 20 minutes to see what my date of birth in order to check. And I said, what's her birthday? Birthday. This is I don't know. And that triggered something. That triggered something in me is to say, you really need to know, because if she's unconscious and you're at the
Yeah.
hospital, they're going to ask the simple question: what is your name? And your
Mhm.
birthday. There was actually one, I'll tell a brief thing. For whatever reason, they asked me a cognitive question. They said, what day is this? And it happened to be July 3rd. So I gave them, the background history of pick a charge. So I think I did well on the cognitive.
Well, as long as I have my phone with me, because I might not pass the birthday test if I don't have my phone on me, because that's the only way I can remember my entire family's birthdays.
But that's okay. But you have the information somewhere. He
Right.
really did. And most
Yeah.
young people, if it isn't in their phone, they don't know, or write it down. Now, I'm surprised. I mean, I can tell you, to the date and hour of my the birthdays of my parents. I mean, they're both dead now, but
Right.
I could still tell you.
My wife could tell you everyone plus that extended cousin, but I just don't have that type of memory. I think this is a great conversation and a great discussion. So tell us more about your book and where people can find it. Because if somebody wants to learn more about this topic, or learn more about you, where could they go to find that?
Well, a little back. The name of the title of the book is Empathy and Understanding in Business, and I wrote it with Chris Voss and a number
Hmm.
of other people. And Chris Voss was an FBI hostage negotiator, and he has techniques that I have found really effective in my business and in my personal life and my public life, of how do you deal with people by not arguing with them, and also the thing of empathy.
Hmm.
We all do that, of we say I hear you. Nobody wants to hear that. That's what you think that they want. What they want to most people want to do is, most people want to be understood. And the way
Hmm.
that you can do that is to ask questions, either to mirror or ask questions, or do things like, it seems like, it sounds like, it feels like, or just, repeat the last three words in order to,
Hmm.
if you don't know, the people will, give you more substantive
Yeah.
response. It's like, when people say, how are you today? What do most of us do?
Brush it off. Say we're fine and brush it off, Raymond. We're not honest about that question ever.
Yeah, I'll give you another. How many times do you get a phone call and somebody just starts talking, and
Yeah.
you picked up the phone? It used to be, look, I think I understand it's a cultural thing, and it used to be when you picked up the phone, you were ready to talk. Now we're not.
Yeah.
We were just ready to take the phone call. But how many people have ever said to you an initial thing? Hi, my name is Raymond Lavine, and I'm applying LTC benefits, and I got your information. Is this a convenient time to talk? How many people will do it that way to you?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the last time I got a phone call because everyone emails and texts me these days. It's just a lost art of communicating that way, and then figuring out how to do it. You're exactly right.
Well, it's also, I mean, in these negotiating things, I mean, there are also things about texting. First of all, if you're texting, don't write a long paragraph. If you'll even do it in a paragraph,
Right.
just be succinct. The topic is, most people, there's when they'll just start talking. What do you want to talk? Tell me the topic so I can think about it. But one of the things that they will that I do is, it isn't, hi, I'm following up, which, the
Hmm.
way I do it, basic is I'll say, it seems like this is not the right time, or are you opposed to, have,
Yeah.
continuing the conversation? Or it seems like this is not the right time, or it seems like this
Hmm.
isn't for you. These are not, these are ways of doing things where people don't feel defensive, is that, they'll think about it.
Yep.
And also it's different. We're in a cliche world where we'll say things and eventually we don't even listen.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
Raymond, this has been a wonderful discussion. So if there was like one thing you want to leave your audience with about reaching out about this important conversation, like how do they connect with you? What do they need to do first? Like what's the big first step that they need to have to make sure that they have got their plans set for the future?
If you want to contact me, the best way is, call me 253-275-6091. So I have an outgoing voicemail where you can text me using that number 253-275-6091. But, if you want to go to my website, www.lavineltcins.com. Now, I've tried not to make it the usual kind of website where, hi, this is Raymond Lavine. I'm wonderful. Love me, talk to me, buy from me. I have, videos and I have, lots of information, to get somebody to tell the story. Now I have two ways to do it. In the upper left corner, you can put in, your lifestyle information, and then it will give you an idea of, if you did need care, how much would it cost, and also the differential.
Mhm.
People don't have to buy a long-term care plan that covers everything. People, if they want to use some of their own money in the early days, or when it isn't expensive, and then want to use a long-term care plan, you can do that. You don't have to have do everything. However, if you buy a plan and it's early enough, it'll grow so much that you probably don't need to ever take any money from your own
Yeah.
assets if you give it time. You got to give it time.
Mhm.
But in the lower right, rather than the link where it says the 58 frequently asked questions, I
Oh.
have it now where it's in AI form. You can ask whatever you want. You can put in, who's Raymond Lavine. You can say, how much is long-term care benefit, and so it's more likely to keep up to date. And I don't have a good love relationship with frequently asked questions, because usually it doesn't really answer what I want, or it takes too much time, and people get impatient if they're a thing, say, let's see, I'm now at 25. I got another, 30 to go. Um, People just don't have
So
the
it sounds like reaching out to you on one of your contacts, and we'll have all that in the show notes for everybody. They can reach out directly to you and get more information. But we always end our segment of our podcast with what we call the Recovering Politician Self-Care Policy of the Week. So Raymond, was a politician, and I'm still in recovery. And I wasn't an alcoholic. It's just the politics about killed me. So we always talk about how to take care of ourselves and self-care. And so one of the things I've found that is really good for me and for my own heart rate is reading. I love to read, but I love to read fiction. My brain does not calm down the same way if I'm reading nonfiction. So if I'm reading about long-term care plans, unfortunately, my heart rate will continue to stay high because my brain's engaged thinking and planning, which is not what I'm needing when I need my self-care. So it's been all sorts of interesting things. And recently I've got myself back into Agatha Christie, which is fantastic. I mean, she passed in 1976. I was alive, barely alive, but I was alive when she passed. But wow, her stuff, I mean, it holds water and it stands the test of time. So all of you out there, that's my recommendation. Pick up an Agatha Christie book. It's pretty cool. So thanks everybody for listening today. We talked to our new friend, Raymond Lavine, about long-term care benefits and planning. And the key takeaway for myself is we have to talk about it. It's part of life. Everybody's going to need care planning. We're all going to need help. We all need care ourselves, and we're all going to be caring for others. So it's a very important conversation we all need to have. We've included lots of information how you can reach out to Raymond and get more information about specifically what he does. Sounds like his website is full of opportunities to learn and to get more information. So please do that. So before we go today, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. And if we do so, we'll send you a prize. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.